Tom Cameron Swayze.
Chad Huntley. David Brent. John Chen.
Tom Brokaw.
Hurricane Katrina. The federal government acknowledges thousands killed, rooftop rescues, and house-to-house searches to save others still trapped. Mean streets. Shootouts in the middle of all the chaos today in New Orleans. Tough questions for federal, state, and local officials, and questions about the background of the man at the center of the storm. And William Rehnquist, the life and legacy of the Chief Justice of the United States, and the looming struggle over a court with 2 vacancies to fill.
This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with John Seigenthaler, reporting tonight from New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone, from the Garden District in New Orleans. Still underwater tonight, an area of the city where rescue workers and helicopters and boats continue to find stranded residents alive, where the smell of sewage and death is overwhelming. But on a day when a federal official acknowledged the death toll from this storm could be in the thousands, we start with the eruption of more violence. It's a deadly shooting here in the chaos of New Orleans, a developing story, and NBC's Carl Quintanilla joins us now with the latest. Carl?
Good evening, John. It is a chaotic and developing story. According to the Associated Press, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says some of its contractors were fired upon by unknown gunmen as they crossed a New Orleans bridge. And meanwhile, the Associated Press quotes police officials as saying police killed 5 or 6 of those gunmen. It was all part of a violent day that we witnessed firsthand. Chasing these alleged suspects, police today were forced to stop escorting a convoy of rescue boats. The suspects and an officer are injured. It's this kind of urban warfare that makes life even more difficult for those trying to rescue and deliver relief. How are they supposed to get to people when they've got to go through gunfire on their way there? These construction workers will poke a hole in a levee, allowing millions of gallons of water to drain. But their police escort had to leave to provide backup at the firefight.
We're more or less stuck right here in the middle right now.
Not every holdout is violent.
Kill him! Kill him!
Rescuers listen for the stranded, but often meet the stubborn.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go down to the Superdome and stand up and burn up down there. I'm nice and cool now.
As rescuers mark evacuated streets, avoiding obstacles above and below. Even firefighters carry guns.
But there are gangs roving around in different parts of the city.
In a catch-22, the sporadic violence actually discourages some from leaving. This man being rescued may be gone for months, so his wife hounds him to lock the house. Concerns about security among the rescued and the rescuers as New Orleans struggles to keep order. The one police officer we were able to talk to following that firefight said he has seen 5 since Hurricane Katrina, but today's, he said, was the worst. John?
NBC's Carl Quintanilla. Carl, thank you. On the Gulf Coast, the rescues and recovery have been joined by recriminations. The Bush administration stung by criticism that the initial response was too little too late. NBC's Tom Costello at the FEMA command post in Baton Rouge tonight. Tom?
John, good evening to you. And now there is talk that this death toll could go well into the thousands across the Gulf Coast and even in New Orleans. And with that, administration officials today were on the ground defending the government's response, but also getting a first-hand reaction and a look at the rescue operations. Nearly a week after the levee broke in New Orleans, rescuers continued to pull victims off rooftops in the pitch black of night and under a searing Louisiana sun. With the death toll expected to climb into the thousands in New Orleans alone, a local politician said on Meet the Press the federal government's slow response is partly to blame.
Bureaucracy has committed murder here in the greater New Orleans area, and bureaucracy has to stand trial.
But while the administration admits mistakes were made, Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff says the focus must be on the ongoing emergency.
So no heads will roll.
Tim, in due course, if people want to go and chop heads off, there'll be an opportunity to do it. The question I would put to people is, what do you want to have us spend our time on now?
Chertoff and other administration officials fanned out across the region today. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice in Alabama.
Y'all are doing a great job.
And Defense Secretary Rumsfeld reviewing the operations involving 54,000 troops on the ground.
It is a natural disaster of historic proportions. No one can come up with anything that approximates it in the history of our country.
Today, the National Guard's commanding general said he could not have pre-positioned equipment any closer.
We don't pre-position at the eye of the hurricane. And as you recall, a week ago this time, we were looking at that hurricane coming right at New Orleans.
The scope of the disaster so great, today NAACP President Bruce Gordon called on the government to establish a victims relief fund, akin to the one established for the 9/11 victims.
And this disaster here in the southeast United States is no less significant, no less dramatic, and the people who are the victims of the lowest socioeconomic group in this country.
And then, John, there is this information as well. Louisiana State University's Hurricane Center has told FEMA that they have run a computer model taking into account everything that has happened to get a feeling for how many people may have died in New Orleans. John, tonight, their estimate is more than 10,000 in New Orleans alone. Back to you.
NBC's Tom Costello. Tom, thank you. Here in New Orleans, there's an eerie sense that this city is almost turned into a ghost town. Still, helicopters filled the sky, carrying out rescues in flooded neighborhoods today as officials work hard to remove water from the Big Easy. NBC's Don Teague is here now with the latest on that. Don?
Good evening, John. We've watched boatloads of victims arrive here within the last hour as the operation to rescue this city continues.
In 48 hours, downtown New Orleans has gone from uncontrolled chaos to a state of lockdown. Most streets deserted except for a few holdout residents. They're seemingly outnumbered by soldiers and police officers who've taken over. In flooded areas, the rescues continue.
This is ground below zero.
The daily tally of those pulled from submerged homes still in the hundreds. Rescuers saved these people this morning.
Water everywhere, up to the roof, up to the ceiling.
20 feet. Up to
20
the ceiling.
feet. Down there to the roof.
We was fighting for our life.
The death toll, too, is rising and taking its toll on those trying to save lives. At least 2 New Orleans police officers have committed suicide. 200 more have reportedly walked off the job. But this city will survive on its faith and hard work. They've already started cleaning up the monumental mess left by the storm and its victims.
There's not a lot we can do, but we're doing what we can.
And hotels are bringing in their own power and preparing to reopen.
To feel like we're moving forward.
If for no other reason than to prove a point.
Because there's a strong resolve here to survive, and for New Orleans residents, that means making this a great city once again. John?
NBC's Don Teague. Don, thank you. From New Orleans now, we move 90 miles up the coast into Mississippi, where residents are desperate for basic services, clean water, power, gas, and more help from the government. NBC's Mike Taibbi joins us now from Biloxi. Mike?
Good evening, John. Yes, with a military helping hand, this city of 55,000 is ever so slowly getting up off the mat, but it may never reach its full height again. Laden with supplies and gear, hovercraft from the assault ship Iwo Jima hit the beach at Biloxi, even as the stricken city saw some power restored, and as Army Air National Guard helicopters scoured the most isolated corners of the coastline, finally getting food, water, ice, and baby supplies to those in need.
This is the most supplies we've had to distribute. Hey, this is fantastic now.
But morgue teams were also getting ready to begin the process of identifying the dead, likely hundreds of victims by one official estimate. And then there's the loss of whole chunks of a city's history and its immediate future. Because of the growth of casino gambling, Biloxi's 6,000 hotel rooms and 1,000 condominium units were going to triple in the next few years. Not now.
We were on the verge, we were on the cusp of just a whole new level of growth. And those things, you know, they're just all on hold right now.
At the moment, only a couple of the 9 ruined casinos here are even sending out word there's a thought to reopening, and then for 6 months at the very earliest. John?
NBC's Mike Taibbi in Biloxi. Mike, thank you. Hundreds of thousands of hurricane evacuees are now in shelters across the country, but the epicenter for survivors is Houston, Texas. NBC's Ron Allen has been spending time with evacuees and joins us from that city. Ron?
Good evening, John. Texas officials are now saying this state has reached its limit with nearly 250,000 evacuees. Here in Houston, the first stop for new arrivals, they've already begun moving people out of the Astrodome behind me, the main shelter, to ease the growing strain. It's a city within the city of Houston. The Astrodome's 16,000 new residents even have their own zip code. Most plan to be here a while.
Hoping to relocate, try to restore my life, you know, get back on track and start all over again.
Glad to have you.
Houston opened its arms so wide it's been forced to redirect tens of thousands of evacuees to cities like Dallas and San Antonio. Nationally, at least a dozen states plan to shelter evacuees. Some arrive this weekend in Florida, Arizona, and Colorado. Back in Houston, few evacuees are as fortunate as Tyra Myers, a single mother of 3. She was invited home to live with Anissa Landano and her family.
I think it's a blessing as far as my kids is concerned.
And I think everyone needs to open their hearts and open their homes.
2 families this crisis has made one. No one here thinks it's wise to keep so many people in such huge shelters for a very long period of time. In Houston, city officials are scrambling to find open housing, jobs, and schools for kids. And the governor of Texas is now saying that he plans an airlift to take some evacuees out of here to other states that are willing to help. John?
NBC's Ron Allen in Houston. Ron, thank you. Now, the other major story tonight, the death of William Rehnquist, the Chief Justice of the United States. His passing removes a strong conservative voice, but offers this administration a double opening to reshape the highest court in the land. Here's NBC's Justice correspondent, Pete Williams.
After learning last night of William Rehnquist's death, President Bush said today he'll act soon on a successor.
I will choose in a timely manner a highly qualified nominee to succeed Chief Justice Rehnquist.
He used that same phrase in a timely manner after Sandra Day O'Connor announced her retirement, and just 2 weeks later he chose John Roberts to succeed her. Whoever follows William Rehnquist will replace the court's senior conservative. During his 33 years on the bench, 19 as Chief Justice, longer than anyone else in more than a century, he became the architect of a legal approach that pushed the court to the right.
I think I have had some say as to the development of constitutional law, and I'm naturally pleased that I have.
The Rehnquist court shifted more power to the states at the expense of Congress, made it harder to sue for some forms of discrimination, and loosened restrictions on use of tax money by religious schools. In recent weeks, the Chief Justice had told friends he was looking forward to serving with John Roberts, who was one of his law clerks in the early 1980s. A Senate committee was scheduled to begin confirmation hearings for Roberts on Tuesday, but now some Democrats are calling for at least a week's delay, partly because so many senators and Roberts himself will want to attend the Rehnquist funeral.
We certainly have a week's cushion built into the hearings, and we can spend the time remembering Justice Rehnquist and not rushing to the hearings.
A delay would also give Democrats time to consider any changes in tactics now that President Bush will have a second chance to mold the court's future. No matter how it goes with Roberts, it's clear now the court will begin its new term next month with no Chief Justice.
This is not like the President of the United States dying. It's more like the Speaker of the House dying. The leader is gone, but the institution can move on.
To succeed William Rehnquist, the president could choose someone from outside the Supreme Court, or he could choose someone who's now on the court and elevate them to be chief, or he could change his mind about John Roberts and nominate him to be Chief Justice. John?
NBC's Pete Williams. Pete, thank you. When NBC Nightly News continues from New Orleans, questions and qualifications, a look at the head of recovery efforts when we come back. We are back from New Orleans now. In the 6 days since Katrina hit, the course of criticism has been rising. For many, the focus and the failure has been FEMA and the man at the top, Michael Brown. Here's NBC's senior investigative correspondent, Lisa Myers.
This was Michael Brown's biggest job before landing at FEMA, supervising judges at Arabian horse shows. The embattled FEMA director does not mention in his official biography on the internet that for 9 years he was commissioner of the International Arabian Horse Association. Association officials tell NBC News that Brown resigned under pressure from that job before joining FEMA.
People wondered how he got to FEMA, as we all did, and it's certainly
What he did with the Arabian Horse Association was nothing what he does with FEMA.
Brown was brought into FEMA by his college roommate, Joe Albaugh, President Bush's first campaign manager and FEMA director. At the time, Brown's only prior experience in emergency services was in a suburb of Oklahoma City in the mid-'70s. He became FEMA director when Albaugh left in 2003. A former FEMA manager questions Brown's qualifications.
His lack of experience in emergency management may have played a role.
Critics also say Brown doesn't seem on top of the situation. The day the levees broke, he said, "I don't want to alarm anyone that New Orleans is filling up like a bowl. That isn't happening." The day after television reports of thousands stranded at the convention center, Brown said,
"The federal government just learned about those people today."
However, on Friday, the president expressed confidence in Brown.
Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. The FEMA director is working 24
Tonight, Homeland Security officials defend Brown. They say he was a senior FEMA manager during 9/11 and is working day and night to save lives in the largest relief effort in American history. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Washington.
When we return tonight from New Orleans, presidential crises. For George Bush, first came Katrina, now the court, as the nation follows the courage of rescuers in the Crescent City. This storm of the century and the selection of a second Supreme Court justice is providing the president with a week of extraordinary challenges. Here's NBC's Kelly O'Donnell.
The president arrived at Red Cross headquarters just minutes after his Roosevelt Room tribute to the late Chief Justice. The implicit message, Mr. Bush cannot appear to spare any more time away from hurricane relief.
This country is coming together to help people who hurt.
Apart from the gigantic real-life rescue underway, the president's credibility has taken on water, voiced by some of the suffering earlier this week.
Bush is not sending these people to help us like he's saying.
And today from public office holders.
There was not great leadership last week.
Even conservative newspapers laid blame on Mr. Bush. Today's Arizona Republic accused the president of uninformed complacency, while the Orange County Register wrote the president's recognition of the crisis came too late for too many people. The president may have complicated his own efforts with lighthearted comments. In the disaster zone Friday, this reference to Mississippi Senator Trent Lott's destroyed home.
This guy lost his entire house. There's going to be a fantastic house, and I'm looking forward to sitting on the porch.
By Saturday morning, a more somber tone in the Rose Garden.
We will not allow bureaucracy to get in the way of saving lives.
The president ramped up resources, mobilized more troops, and wrapped his arms around survivors.
The president, I think, is doing everything he can at this time.
Still, he is left with a challenge.
His first impressions are lasting ones, and I think the first impression was that the president did not react to this hurricane in the same way that he did after 9/11.
Senior advisors say they are acutely aware of the second guessing and plan what they call a sustained hands-on presence as the president returns to the region tomorrow. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News, the White House.
When NBC Nightly News returns from New Orleans tonight, keeping the faith, spiritual recovery in the wake of the storm, and saving the stranded as more people escape the flood. On this first Sunday since the storm, devastated communities are coming together for services. They are finding power in prayer and in participating as a congregation once again. Here's NBC's Ron Mott.
Along Mississippi's Gulf Coast this Sunday, they came to reunite. They came to pray.
One God, now and forever.
But mostly, they came to see just how much Katrina changed the symbols of their faith. In Biloxi, a boombox in place of a piano, lawn chairs for pews.
I can't tell the difference between being really happy and being really sad. I cry on both occasions.
Mass at the destroyed Episcopal Church of the Redeemer never looked so rugged.
It's time to rise and meet the challenges in your hand.
At the Church of God in nearby Gulfport, there's little damage, but plenty of tears and reflection.
And I need to hear something positive sometime. If not, I don't believe I'll make it. The storm has taught me a lot, that I need to change my life.
Katrina spared no denomination, no religion.
The church is not the building. The church is the members, the body of Christ, the people. This is just a place where we meet to worship.
But already they're looking forward to the restoration, making stronger religious commitments as well as stronger structures.
I know for a fact this coast will rebuild after this. I mean, it's the fact that we're all out here today is proof of that.
Was blind, but now I see.
Revealing faith ever clearer in light of Katrina's destruction. Ron Mott, NBC News, Biloxi, Mississippi.
This Sunday was also a day of reflection for some here in New Orleans. We end tonight's broadcast with a story of faith, perseverance, and neighbors helping neighbors. Ever since the storm hit, her friends have been calling Mary Gracianette Saint Mary.
She is God sent. I wouldn't know where to go if it wasn't for her.
She's been feeding her neighbors at her restaurant.
Knock on every door and find out who's in there and if they're hungry.
Mary rode out the storm in this room. In the chaos that followed, she's also found time to help clean up her church, St. Agnes Catholic Church down the street. That's where her daughter, who had not heard from Mary in almost a week, finally found her yesterday.
So worried about you, Mama.
Today, Mary came back to St. Agnes with a few friends. There was no priest, so they prayed together.
Seeing the people here, knowing that we still have faith, our church is still here. The doors are open for everyone.
On this Sunday, the open doors of St. Agnes became their refuge from the storm. And that's nightly news for this Sunday. I'm Seigenthaler reporting from New Orleans. For all of us at NBC News, good night.